Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War news update, second part thereof for the 20th of February 2024. My first video was on my other channel, so I do apologise, I had to post it there because something in it triggered the YouTubes. I'm going to start with this. We're not asking for too much, we only need artillery shells and aircraft. We'll do the rest ourselves. Armed Forces of Ukraine. That is from a message from a Ukrainian soldier call sign Skidny, who until 2020 onwards partisan in the Russian-occupied town of Kadivka. This is absolutely right. You know, there are very few things that they need because they're starting to build up, the Ukrainians, a capacity to build equipment themselves. Drones. Even Bogdana, we'll talk about this self-propelled howitzer. They'll soon have facilities to build armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles. So there are certain things that the aid, the military aid assisters, partners can help particularly with, that just can't be sourced within Ukraine, even with outside help. Airframes and the amount of ammunition that they need. So this is there's a lot of truth in that. So let's start with, after that, with one of the biggest bits of news, which is Sweden giving their largest military aid package to date. Sweden has announced the largest package to date, worth almost $700 million. And this includes, well, you can look at the list of what it includes there. We're going to go and listen to what Paul Jonsson says, who is the defense minister in Sweden. Says today Sweden announced the largest support package for Ukraine yet. It is worth $683 million, bringing combined value of military assistance to Ukraine to $2.9 billion. For the size of the country that Sweden is, that is impressive. Continuing support is crucial for both Ukraine and Swedish security. So again, it's selling it on not just a benefit to Ukraine, it's a benefit to Sweden. The support package meets some of Ukraine's most pressing needs and is in line with military capability coalitions that are taking shape within the Ukraine Defence Contact Group. Sweden will donate more artillery ammunition, yes. Air defence systems, RBS-70, anti-tank missiles, TOW anti-tank missiles, hand grenades and Carl Gustaf grenade launchers. Sweden will also donate medical supplies and economic aid to funds for the procurement of more weapons to Ukraine, and you can bet your bottom dollar that will include artillery ammunition. Furthermore, Sweden will support Ukraine with 10 CB-90 combat boat 90, 20 group boats and underwater weapons. So this aids the ability for Ukraine to operate across, say, rivers, across lakes and reservoirs. Sweden is already a member, or of course at sea, a member of the Drone, Demining, Air Force and Armour Coalition. As global military stocks dwindle, we will focus more on donations. This aid package will add 1 billion Swedish krona to the Swedish-Danish joint procurement of CV-90s to Ukraine. So this will help fund more CV-90s made by BAE Systems to get over those infantry fighting vehicles, to get over to Ukraine. This means that Sweden and Denmark will jointly invest $385 million towards that goal. Russia's war on Ukraine is also a war against the rules-based order. Ukraine is not only defending its own freedom, but that of all of Europe. Sweden will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Russia cannot be allowed to win this war. So that's really good news from Sweden and will help, as mentioned, where the needs are most keenly felt. The question is, how many artillery shells does that entail in direct donations? And I guess how much can be put towards the procurement of further shells. That's really what Ukraine need the most at the moment. Canada will donate more than 800 Sky Ranger R-17 multi-mission unmanned aerial systems to Ukraine to aid in its defence against Russia's illegal and unjustified full-scale invasion, the Canadian Ministry of Defence announced on the 19th of February. Actually, this amounts to quite a big package of stuff. It is worth about $70.4 million just alone for those drones, part of a $500 million Canadian dollar military assistance pledged by Justin Trudeau from his visit to Kyiv last year. And the Dutch defence minister has also declared that the Netherlands is already shipping drones to Ukraine. The Netherlands announced on February the 14th that it would take part in a coalition led by Latvia to provide Ukraine with advanced military drone technology. Fantastic. Drones seem to be such an important part of this war that although Ukraine has really upped their drone manufacturing capacity, they need as much help as they can get in those sectors too, to keep the drone advantage going in certain sectors. Right, Joseph Borrell from the EU said, member states, this is massively important. One of the most important things I'll say in this whole segment, really, this whole video. The EU member states can procure ammunition for Ukraine outside the bloc. The European Union's top diplomat said that he urged member states to procure ammunition for Ukraine outside the bloc if this source of supply is better, cheaper and quicker. Quote, there is also financing to buy ammunition outside of Europe. It's not just limited to the supply that can be provided from the European defence industry, Borrell told reporters. Now, what I'm trying to work out is if there is still a veto on the EU as a unit buying artillery ammunition from outside of the EU. So with EU funds, the EU going to buy that and providing that to Ukraine. What I presume he's saying is if you want to go out and buy artillery for Ukraine, we can refund you through the EU. So possibly there is funding that can come from the EU for you to be able to do that so that you can get backfilling or whatever. There are all these different mechanisms within the EU, but it might not be... the EU might not be able to go out and do that themselves. So it's like two sides of the square, really. And this is on the back of, and I reported this yesterday or the day before, that Greece, Cyprus and France have blocked funding for the supply of Bayraktar drones and Turkish-made artillery shells to Ukraine. So, okay, what did I report the other day? I reported that France, Greece and Cyprus had vetoed the EU procuring ammunition from outside the EU. And again, this is with the central funds going outside the EU to buy stuff. And I said this is because, and this will be the case for France particularly, this will be because they want the EU money to stay inside the EU to generate jobs inside the EU and keep the revenue, the taxes and all that kind of stuff within the EU. And there is a really strong economic case for that. The problem is Ukraine needs stuff right now, and that makes things longer. So, yes. Now, I then said, I was just speculating that, well, maybe Greece and Cyprus have their own artillery ammunition factories, well, I was thinking Cyprus really, in their own countries so that they would veto it going outside. Well, actually, this makes a lot more sense. So it looks like the EU were looking at going to Greece to buy artillery and, to Turkey to buy artillery ammunition. And Greece and Cyprus, or at least the Greek Cypriot half of Cyprus, are not fans of Turkey, right? There's a long-running dispute, and so they would veto not so much money going outside the EU to procure ammunition, but EU money going to Turkey to buy ammunition. So that's effectively Greek and Cypriot money partly going to Turkey, and they're like, no. So that makes a lot more sense. So I'm glad that I caught this. So this was reported by the Greek edition of Katimirini. The drones and shells were to be purchased with European funds. So I presume now that Joseph Borrell has come out and said this, that nations can individually do that. Well, good news coming, says No Reports, in reposting what Rustem Umerov, the Ukrainian defense minister, said. He had a fruitful call with the Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, or Czechia, Jana Černochová, who expressed his gratitude to the Czech Republic for constant comprehensive military assistance, training of Ukrainian pilots, and participation in the demining coalition, stressed on the importance of increasing supplies of artillery ammunition. This is a key one because, remember, Czechia announced that they could get their hands on, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of artillery shells. And yeah, Rustem Umerov says, grateful to our Czech colleagues for their proactive position in providing Ukraine with the necessary ammunition. Hopefully the aggressor will soon feel the results of our cooperation on the battlefield. This hints that there has been some deal behind closed doors, that there is some kind of acquisition of artillery ammunition, and my guess it's probably coming at least partly from Turkey. So that is good news as far as I am concerned. Right, US President Joe Biden is ready to meet with House Speaker Mike Johnson to discuss a $95 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Things are getting pretty desperate as far as that bill in Congress is concerned. Now, the truth of the matter is that Mike Johnson is not really representing, like, in going on recess for 2 weeks and saying he's not going to table that bill, he's not really representing the majority of House Republicans, or at least a proportion of them, because apparently there will easily be enough signatures if most of the Democrats vote and you've got almost a 50-50 split in the House of Representatives. That very small majority that the Republicans have is getting eaten away as they keep losing special elections and getting their Republican lawmakers replaced by Democrats. That is a dwindling majority. Now, apparently, and this is good news, that there is clearly bipartisan support in the House of Representatives for the aid bill to go through. And I guess that's what Mike Johnson is afraid of. That if he puts it to the floor, it will get through, and then he will get a spanking from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and from Trump. And this is basically all about Mike Johnson, really. Now, it's also worth reminding you, and this came out again, or another newspaper article came out again. I did a whole segment on this previously to show that Mike Johnson has some dubious funding behind him. Who is Konstantin Nikolaev, Putin ally, behind Mike Johnson's campaign donation? So the Newsweek again 3 days ago came up with an updated article on this, talking about how the Russians have previously funded Mike Johnson's campaign, political campaigns. So in 2018, a group of Russians were able to donate to Johnson's bid for Louisiana seat he eventually won, as the money was funneled through the Texas-based American Ethane Company. While American Ethane was co-founded by American John Hortling, at the time it was 88% owned by three Russian nationals, Konstantin Nikolaev, Mikhail Yuriev, and Andrei Kunatbev. Nikolaev is known to be a top ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. A spokesperson for Johnson previously assured in 2018 that the campaign returned the money that was given them by American Ethane once it was made aware of the situation. Oh, how convenient. There was no indication that Johnson's campaign team willfully broke federal law, which makes it illegal for a campaign to knowingly accept donations from a foreign-owned corporation, a foreign national, or any other company owned or controlled by foreign nationals. A number of social media users have now brought up that the company money amid Johnson's opposition to the long-debated foreign aid bill, which would send $60 billion to Ukraine as the country continues to fight off Russian invasion. In a press conference on February the 14th, Johnson said he would not bring the bill recently passed by the Senate back to the House vote, and that the Republican-led House will not be jammed or forced into passing the foreign aid bill. The same day, Ukraine-based blog Fakeoff posted on Twitter, quote, US Speaker of the House Mike Johnson received campaign contributions from American Ethane, a company 88% owned by three Russians. Now do you understand why he's categorically against the aid to Ukraine? And so this is kind of doing the rounds again. It seems like that money went back to American Ethane, but there is this involvement with a close friend of Putin with Mike Johnson's campaign, and this has to cast some kind of doubt on Mike Johnson's motivations here. It really does. Anyway, back on with where we were. So Joe Biden is going to meet, hopefully, with Mike Johnson. That needs to happen. It needs to be urgently passed, this bill. It is costing lives. It really is. Okay, Susplina, a Ukrainian media outlet, has said that Ukraine is working with SpaceX to disable Russia's use of Starlink on front lines, the minister says. I wonder if this is a case of working with SpaceX as opposed to Elon Musk. Elon Musk is really, he wears his colours, he wears his heart on his sleeve, really, with regard to Ukraine and Russia. So I don't know. During an interview with Susplina on February the 19th, Ukraine's digital transformation minister Mikhailo Fedorov revealed that Ukraine is working with SpaceX to find a solution to disable Russia's use of Starlink satellite internet terminals in temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. My guess is this probably has more to do with the US Department of Defense. So we know that because Elon Musk was getting so involved in geofencing and causing problems for the Ukrainians, the US Department of Defense took on a massive contract with SpaceX to try and remove Elon Musk and other variables from military matters, very much in the interests of the US government. So they needed, rightly, to get big individual players, like single human beings, out of the mix of decision making. So basically, Elon Musk agreed to separate part of SpaceX off into part of Starlink's operations off into a military entity. Kind of a defense military industrial complex. So part of SpaceX is now just, doing stuff doing military stuff, right? My guess is that is who Ukraine are working with. I doubt this has got really anything to do directly with Elon Musk at all, because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be supportive of that. So this is precisely why the US DoD did do that contract with the military arm. I forget the name of the military arm. Anyway, of SpaceX, that is. The Traffic Light Coalition in Germany, composed of the SPD, Greens, and FPD, so Olaf Scholz is of the SPD party, is pushing for additional arms deliveries to Ukraine, increasing pressure on Chancellor Olaf Scholz, while avoiding explicit mention of Taurus missiles, cruise missiles. A draft motion calls for the delivery of additionally necessary long-range weapon systems to support Ukraine's territorial integrity. Indeed, deputies of various factions in the Bundestag want to vote this week on the issues of supplying Ukraine with long-range weapons. The reason was apparently Navalny's death, according to Stern. The big question is, what is the rest of the world going to do about Navalny's death, about the seeming murder of an opposition politician in a country geographically within Europe? This is, something I guess we're yet to see come to fruition. Now, I said the other day that the only real difference between Taurus and Storm Shadows and Scalps is the range. And I knew at the time there were technical differences. I just couldn't... as far as I remember it, they're slightly better at bunker breaching. Getting into bunkers and underground structures and destroying them. So anyway, someone posted this to me: why Germany is rattled about sending its Taurus missile to Ukraine. So what really are the differences? So it's about the fuse, this article says, according to Fabian Hoffmann, a doctoral research fellow and missile expert at the University of Oslo, who dug into the different devices. The Storm Shadow and Scalp Broach warhead system uses a so-called multi-approach fuse initiation system, where the delay between impact and warhead detonation is set by hand. That makes it difficult to properly target complex objects like bridges, as a warhead may have to first pass through a relatively thin roadbed before impacting on the real objective, the concrete pillar holding up the whole structure. The Taurus tackles that issue with its Mephisto warhead being equipped with a void sensing and layer counting fuse called PIMPF, Programmable Intelligent Multiple Purpose Fuse, which can recognize layers of material and voids and can more effectively blow up multi-layered or buried targets. Quote, one missile equipped with a void sensing and layer counting fuse can therefore cause the damage that previously could only be achieved with 2 or more accurately dropped bombs, Hoffman wrote, adding that if Ukraine gets the Taurus missile, it would be able to effectively strike the Kerch Bridge, linking Russian proper with occupied Crimea. Sorry if you heard a ringing on the computer there as I was getting phoned by my partner. Anyway, that's why Scholz is reluctant to supply the Taurus, says this article, because it will seem escalatory if Ukraine are going to use it to hit the Kerch Bridge. It'd be the perfect missile to take out the Kerch Bridge, and I think Olaf Scholz is worried about that. It's not the only reason causing concern in Berlin, says the article. Storm Shadow and Scalp and Taurus both use terrain contour mapping system to remain on course in GPS-compromised environments, but Berlin worries that the Taurus missile would need topographical mapping data to its targets programmed into their guidance systems by Germany. And again, that might seem as escalatory, so on and so forth. There are some other worries of it falling into Russian hands because of the technology involved with it, and so on and so forth. It's specifically engineered to counter Russian air defense systems like the Pantsir and the S-400, making it especially interesting for Russian troops to get their hands on. But all of these arguments exist for basically all the weapons that Ukraine it might use that are vaguely modern. So anyway, moving on, Bulgaria is delaying the delivery of 100 armoured personnel carriers to the Ukrainian army because the defence ministry has requested that NATO cover the transport costs. So those 100 older, I think they BTRs that BTR 60s that are being promised by Bulgaria are still not in Ukraine. Japan will provide $12.1 billion in aid to Ukraine, according to the Prime Minister of Ukraine. This includes the announced and implemented volume, and in particular, the $4.7 billion grant that Ukraine will receive by the end of February. Before that, dozens of agreements were signed with Japan. So it's some real closening of ties between Ukraine and Japan, which is great news. I wonder, there's no such thing as a free lunch. What are Japan getting out of this? How are they involved in the reconstruction and of Ukraine and other ideas of benefit for aiding Ukraine? Intergovernmental Convention on Avoidance of Double Taxation. These are the benefits or the agreements that have been signed with Japan. Dozens of agreements on supporting the recovery of Ukraine with Japanese organizations, JICA, JETRO, Export Credit Agency, NEXI, and Japan Bank for International Cooperation. Grant agreements on the implementation of restoration programs, intergovernmental memoranda on cooperation in the field of education and technology. So you would imagine that the Japanese companies and organizations are going to be heavily involved in all of those processes. Right, this is a real shame, actually. So the news, and Joe Blogs did a whole video saying that this is good stuff, and Ukraine are going to get some half decent kit, or at least some very much needed Soviet era kit from Ecuador. So the US were going to backfill Ecuador with a bunch of US kit, Black Hawk helicopters and whatnot, and Ecuador were going to give kit to Ukraine as kind of scrappage. Goes to Ukraine, Ukraine get to use that. Russia said, you ain't doing that, mate. We're going to put a ban on Ecuadorian bananas into Russia. Russia, I think, is the fourth biggest importer of bananas, although that's, after the EU, which is itself a massive importer. I think it's, I can't remember, it's US, EU, possibly Japan, and then Russia. But that is now stopped. Ecuador will not transfer its old Russian military equipment to Ukraine, Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld has said. According to her, this is a clear instruction from the president of Ecuador not to supply military equipment to countries in a state of armed conflict. I mean, technically, I think it would be against the contract I think they would have signed with Russia for getting this stuff in the first place. But this is a real shame. And it looks like Russia has been able to successfully put pressure on Ecuador to change its position there. That's a real kick in the teeth for Ukraine. More and more two S-22 Bogdana 2.0s are making their way to the Ukrainian battlefront. Ukraine, with the help of partners, has massively increased production of these 155mm self-propelled howitzers. Of course, the big question is, do they have the artillery in order to use these? But it's great news that they're able to produce these in useful numbers themselves and get them to the front line to be used. Right, pilots are already flying F-16 solo every day, but the requirements for these pilots have changed, and training is taking a bit longer because the pilots need to be able to operate a full range of missions beyond wartime scenarios. This doesn't surprise me at all, and the reality is you want the Ukrainian pilots to be as well trained as possible before sending these pilots and airframes to the front line. It's not that the airframes are crazy expensive. It's really, I mean, yes, there is that, but it's really about the expertise of the pilots. You lose pilots who are not quite trained to the requisite standards. You lose years of expertise and training, and you have to go, start from scratch again. So it's a real risk to you. It's that trade-off between getting these airframes to the front line and using them because they need to be used as quickly as possible, but then having your pilots trained up well enough on a variety of missions to be able to use the planes effectively and keep them flying in the air, keep them safe, keep them away from danger. There's a trade-off there, and we'll see where it ends up. But it doesn't surprise me that there will be that there are delays to then getting to the front line. The network claims that as a result of the blockade of Polish farmers, weapons for Ukrainian soldiers are being delayed at the border. These photos show trucks that are supposed to go to the artillerymen to quickly unload ammunition at the position. So the problem of the Polish borders is again raising its ugly head, and it's getting worse. And there are military shipments or there's military cargo that is waiting to cross the border that is getting stuck in these blockades. Now, I have said, I don't know if I said it on a video, but I was thinking yesterday, this has to be more than just those farmers and hauliers getting annoyed. Like they are now taking it to another level, and I think this has gone beyond that. It's become political, but there's got to be influence from Russia. There's got to be anti-EU and pro-Russian sentiments going on here that goes beyond just what's happening with Ukraine. And so this is particularly worrying for me, and we'll dip into it in the geopolitical section in my next video, because there's too much content to do in just a single one. Now, this is a prototype of a Russian cargo drone, which is supposed to fly 500 kilometers and carry up to 300 kilograms of payload. At the same time, it's stated that it will take off, land, and transport cargo independently without operator intervention. Doesn't look very practical to me, says PS01. But this, again, goes to show that drones are becoming very much an area, a sector where everyone is piling in resources in research and development to try and get as many types of drones with as many capabilities as possible, effectively to save lives. So you're not having to use human beings in that situation, but also to just efficiently and effectively do whatever it is that needs doing. So it's all about drones at the moment, isn't it? That and artillery shells. And that is it from me. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.